Hey everyone, if you love scary stories, hit that subscribe button and join the creepy crew. Don't forget to like a video and tell me in the comments, what time are you watching this now? Get comfortable and relax. Our family had been running a cute TikTok account for a while. We posted funny moments, cooking dinner together, playing with our dog, talking about our daily lives. My daughter Ellie especially loves sharing little stories about school, and our followers were always supportive. It felt safe, just harmless, fun. But recently I noticed a particular user leaving persistent comments, always asking for something more interesting. His username was T Roxy. At first, I assumed he was just another troll, the kind you learn to ignore when you're active. Online, that's when she hesitated. She admitted that she kind of liked the attention. He made her feel special, like she had a real fan who noticed her more than anyone else, and then she let it slip. He had promised her gifts that changed. Everything I kept my voice calm, but inside I was panicking. I explained that no adult should ever be offering a child gifts online, especially not a stranger. I told her that if she ever gave him personal information, if she told him where she lived or what school she went to, she needed to tell me immediately. The way Ellie had defended him, the way she had smiled at her phone when she talked about him, made me feel sick. I knew teenage girls craved attention, especially from people who made them feel important, and I knew how predators worked. They didn't come on strong. They made kids trust them. First, I wanted to take away her phone. I wanted to shut down our TikTok account, but I also knew that if I pushed too hard, she'd just hide things from me. Instead, I told her that if T Roxy ever messaged her again, I needed to see it. She rolled her eyes, but agreed. I didn't sleep well that night. A week later, Mark and I had to leave town for a day due to a work emergency. Ellie stayed with my sister, who lived just a few houses down. It wasn't unusual. Ellie loved spending time there, and my sister was strict about curfews. I told myself everything would be fine when we got back the next morning. My sister met us at the door, pale and shaken. Ellie never came home last night. She said, my stomach dropped. What do you? Mean, where did she go? She said she was meeting a friend. She left around 7. I texted her at 9. Oh, 0. No response. I assumed she just fell asleep early. I ran upstairs to check Ellie's room, even though I knew she wouldn't be there. Her phone was on her bed screen. Still, on the last thing open was a chat with T Roxy. My hands shook as I scrolled. T Roxy, I have a surprise for you. Something special, Ellie. What is it? T Roxy, meet me at the corner store. I promise you'll love it, Ellie. I don't know. My aunt is kind of strict. T Rock, come on, just for a few minutes. No one will know. It's our little secret, Ellie. Okay, just for a little bit. My heart pounded. I screamed for Mark, and within seconds we were calling Ellie's friends. Anyone who might know where she was. No one had seen her then. We checked the security footage from the store down the street. There she was, standing outside looking around nervously. A car pulled up. The driver's face was hidden by a hoodie. She hesitated, then got in the car, drove off. I couldn't breathe. We called. The police officers arrived within minutes, asking for details, her height, what she was wearing, who she might have been with. They took her phone and started tracing her last known location. The waiting was unbearable. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then they found something. Traffic cameras had captured the car heading toward the outskirts of town, disappearing down an old highway. A detective told us they'd seen similar patterns before. Someone using social media to lure kids in. A known predator, Ellie, had been gone for almost 12 hours too. Days later, they found her. She was in an abandoned house in a small town an hour away. The man who took her, T Roxy, whose real name was Thomas Reed, had been watching her for weeks. He had a history of targeting young girls on social media, building their trust before taking them. Ellie was alive, but barely bruised, shaking, unable to speak. She had been tied up. We don't know how far things went before they found her, and I don't want to know the police arrested him on the spot. He had done this before. We were lucky. Some girls hadn't been. We deleted everything, every social media account, every video I wanted, to erase every trace of our online life. The thought that our harmless TikToks had led him to my daughter still makes me sick. Ellie doesn't talk much anymore. She used to be so bright, so full of life. Now she barely leaves her room. I don't know if she'll ever be the same. Again, we thought we were just having fun. We thought we were safe. We weren't. Please, if you have kids online, watch them. Even the most innocent post can attract the worst kind of music people. The TikTok challenge was simple. Follow a random stranger at night, record their reaction, and post it. People were going viral, doing it, laughing in the comments, adding creepy music, making it seem like a horror movie, my friends, and I thought it was harmless, just a dumb Prank, nothing serious. So that night, we met up in the park around midnight looking for someone alone. It wasn't hard. The streets were mostly empty, just a few people walking home from bars or working late shifts. Then we saw him, a man in his 40s, maybe older. A couple of times, he slowed his pace like he was listening for something, but he never turned around. So we got bolder. Zach, the loudest in our group, whispered that we should make it creepier. Someone suggested using a camera flash, just a quick blink of light, to see if he reacted. We thought it was hilarious. So I held up my phone, aimed, and snapped a photo. The bright white flash lit up the pavement. The man stiffened. He didn't stop, didn't turn around, but his posture changed a little more. Rigid. More aware, we ducked behind a tree, muffling our laughter, waiting. He kept walking, but slower. Now like he was listening harder. Do it again. Zach whispered another flash. This time he turned his head slightly, just enough to glance over. His shoulder. We froze for a second, I thought. He was going to stop May, maybe say something, but he just kept walking. We should have stopped there. It was already weird enough, but the whole point of the challenge was to push it further to see how much we could freak him out before he caught on. Zach, of course, wanted to take it to the next level. What if I get really close? He whispered, grinning. No, dude, I muttered, that's too much. But Zach was already moving. He stepped faster, closing the distance. We stayed back holding, our breath, watching. The guy still hadn't turned all the way around. He was maybe 20 feet ahead, moving a little faster than before. Then Zach lunged forward and grabbed his shoulder. The man spun instantly. Zach let out a loud laugh, expecting him to jump to flinch, but instead the man shoved him back hard. Zach stumbled, surprised, but still laughing, like it was part of the joke. And then before any of us could react, the man reached into his jacket. The man moved fast, too fast. Before any of us could react, pulled a gun. Zach's laughter cut off instantly. He threw up, his hands stumbling back. The rest of us froze. My heart started hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic, the wind rustling through the trees. Then the man took a step forward. I dropped behind a bush without thinking, my phone still recording. The others did the same, ducking behind trees, cars, anything but Zach was still standing there, too close, too exposed. The man didn't hesitate, a single gunshot. Split the air. Z jerked back then. Crumpled to the ground. We screamed. All of us. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was just a stupid challenge, a joke. But Zach was on the ground, gasping blood, soaking through his hoodie. Please, man, stop. We didn't mean someone. Choked out, the man stood there for a second, staring down at Zach. His grip on the gun was tight, his jaw clenched. Then without a word, he turned and ran. I couldn't move. My whole body felt like it had shut down. Zach was wheezing his hands. Pressed to his stomach, blood pooling between his fingers. Call 911. Someone shouted. My hands fumbled for my phone. It took 3 tries to hit the right buttons. I barely got the words out to the dispatcher. Gunshot. We need help. He's bleeding. I pressed down on Zach's wound, but the blood wouldn't stop. He was shaking his face, pale. Hang on, dude, I whispered. The ambulance is coming. But his eyes started to unfocus. His breathing slowed. My name is Sophia. I'm from New York, and I used to be a popular charity blogger on TikTok. I loved helping people on my page. I recorded videos of myself handing out food, clothes, and supplies to the homeless, encouraging my followers to donate. It made me feel like I was doing something good. And honestly, people loved it. The engagement was huge that day. I was in the Bronx. I had just bought a bunch of sandwiches from a deli, good ones too, with turkey and cheese, not just peanut butter and jelly. I had my phone in one hand, my bag of sandwiches in the other. The plan was simple: walk around, hand them out, record people's reactions, and post it later. At first, everything was going great. I found a few people near a bus stop who were sitting on flattened cardboard, and when I offered them food, they smiled, nodded, took the sandwiches. I made sure to hold the camera right, get their faces in the frame, show the gratitude in their eyes. That was the content people liked. I thought this is really cool. This is making a difference. I kept walking a few more sandwiches, handed out a few more. Clips recorded, some people waved at the camera, others just muttered thanks and looked away. I didn't force it if they didn't. I want to be filmed. I respected that I was careful to keep it all positive. No exploitative angles. Just good deeds being done. Then I turned onto a smaller street where the buildings were more run down and the trash cans were overflowing. Onto the sidewalk. That's when a man approached me. He was dirty, but his expression was friendly, and he spoke in a soft voice. "Hey, miss," he said, "you got any more of those?" I nodded and pulled out a sandwich. "Of course," I said, handing it over. He took it carefully, almost like he didn't want to touch me by accident. Then he looked around and leaned in a little. "There's more folks like me a couple blocks down. You want to come? I can show you." That sounded perfect. If there were more homeless people, that meant more people. I could help more moments I could capture. I adjusted my phone in my hand and smiled. "Yeah, that'd be great." He nodded and started walking, and I followed. The street was getting quieter as we moved further from the main road. Fewer cars, few people. I kept my phone up, recording, getting shots of the cracked pavement, the graffiti-covered walls. He turned a corner into an alley. I hesitated. It wasn't well lit, and the buildings on either side were tall, blocking out most of the sunlight, but I could hear voices in the distance, and I figured that's where the others were. "It's just down here," he said. Motioning for me to follow, I stepped in the air. Smelled like old trash and something else. Something sour. My footsteps echoed a little as I moved deeper. The alleyway narrowed, and that's when I noticed something was off. There weren't more homeless people. There were just two men standing at the end of the alley, waiting. I stopped. My stomach tightened. The man who brought me here turned around to face me. He wasn't smiling anymore. One of the men at the end of the alley stepped forward and reached for my phone. I jerked back, gripping it tighter. "Hey, what the hell?" The second man grabbed my hair and yanked hard. I screamed loud. My phone slipped from my hand as the man yanked me backward by my hair. My scalp burned, my vision blurred for a second, and before I could react, they shoved me to the ground. The pavement scraped my hands and knees shut up. One of them muttered. I tried to scramble up, but the first guy, the one who had led me here, pressed his knee into my stomach, pinning me. Gasped for air, kicking, twisting, trying to push him off, but he was heavier, stronger. The second guy picked up my phone. He held it up, pointed it at me, recording. "Go ahead," he said to the one on top of me. "Make it good." My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. My legs kept thrashing, but my arms were pinned. Now the third guy, the one who hadn't spoken yet, knelt beside me. He smelled like sweat and cigarettes. His hands moved toward my jacket, grabbing at the zipper. I lost it. I screamed again, thrashed harder, tried to bite, claw, anything. One of them slapped me hard. My vision went white for a second, my ears ringing. "Shut up." I thought this was it. This was where it ended. Then a car horn, loud close. All three of them froze. The guy holding my hair loosened his grip. The one with my phone looked toward the street. Tires screeched. A car door slammed. "What the hell's going on here?" A man's voice, deep, angry. They jumped up. The one with the phone cursed under his breath. I twisted, trying to see a guy mid-40s, heavy build, holding a baseball bat, was standing at the mouth of the alley. His car was still running headlights, aimed straight at us. The man with the bat took a step forward. I said, "What the hell is this?" The three guys scattered, no hesitation. The one with my phone bolted first. The other two, right behind him. I lay there shaking, trying to process what just happened. The man walked over, crouched down. "You okay?" I couldn't answer. My hands were shaking too hard. I love making short dance videos for TikTok with my friends. We recently found a trending challenge where people dance on the side of the road while cars rush past behind them. The movement of headlights and speeding vehicles created an amazing visual effect. It looked thrilling, almost cinematic. We watched dozens of these videos, analyzing the best angles, the best timing, the best locations. Everyone in the comments was talking about how cool it looked, how dangerous but exciting it was. We decided to try it ourselves. We knew it was risky, but we weren't reckless. We had a plan, the rush of watching the numbers climb. It wasn't just about dancing. It was about being seen, about standing out. We spent the afternoon picking outfits, something bright, something that would pop in the low light of early evening. By the time we arrived at the spot, the sun was already sinking, the air was cool, and the road was damp from a drizzle earlier in the day. It made the asphalt shine under the headlights of passing cars. Perfect for the effect we wanted. We set up quickly. I placed my phone on the tripod, angling it just right to capture the road behind us. The sun was nearly gone, and the streetlights weren't bright enough to fully illuminate us. It was getting harder to see the details on screen, and then it started drizzling again. It was light, barely more than mist, but it made the road slicker. I hesitated, watching the headlights reflect off the wet surface. Something about it felt off. Maybe we should stop. I said it's getting too dark, but no one else wanted to quit. Just one more, Hannah insisted. It'll look even cooler with the rain. The others agreed. They were all excited, hyped up. I didn't want to be the one to ruin the moment, so we kept going. The next time we played the music, we committed to the full routine. The rhythm, the movements, the timing, it all clicked. And right as we hit the final move, a car sped past behind us, its light streaking through the rain like something out of a movie. It looked perfect. We filmed a few more takes, tweaking small details, our angles, our spacing, until we were sure we had the best shot. The road was getting darker, the rain a little heavier, but we were too caught up in the moment to care. Then Hannah had an idea. We should move a little closer. She said, like right at the edge. I turned to her. Are you serious? Closer we are, the cooler it'll look, she said, already adjusting. Her position, the cars need to pass right behind us. Like right there, she pointed to a spot, maybe a meter from the lane. It was reckless too. Reckless, I hesitated, but no one else seemed worried. Instead, they adjusted their position, stepping closer. I felt a knot in my stomach. I wasn't scared for myself. I could step back at any time, but I was scared for Hannah. She was always the one pushing things too far. I dug into my bag, pulled out a reflective vest, and handed it to her. At least wear this, I muttered. She laughed, but put it on. See, we're being responsible. I wasn't convinced, but I didn't stop her. The camera was already rolling again. The music started, we danced, and then a loud screech, tires skidding. I turned my head just in time to see headlights veering. A massive black SUV was coming too fast. Swerving into our lane, I barely had time to process it before the sound hit, a sickening thud, metal crunching against flesh. Hannah was gone. No, not gone. Thrown, her body flew back, crashing onto the pavement. 5M, maybe more. She hit the ground hard and didn't move, screaming. Someone was screaming, maybe all of us. The SUV skidded to a stop further down the road. The driver stumbled out, panicked, running toward us. I didn't see her. She was too close. I tried to swerve, but I wasn't listening. I was running toward Hannah. She wasn't moving, blood spread beneath her, mixing with the rain on the asphalt. Her eyes were half open, her chest rising and falling in short, shallow gasps. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking too much to dial. Someone else was calling 911. Someone else was crying, their voice raw and broken. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. The ambulance arrived, red and blue lights flashing over the wet pavement. Paramedics rushed in, pushing us back, working fast. But I could tell before they even lifted her onto the stretcher. She was slipping away. We followed them to the hospital, but by the time we got there, it was too late. Hannah was gone. None of us spoke. No one cried anymore. We just sat in silence, staring at the cold hospital floor, replaying everything over and over. The laughter, the music, the rain, the headlights. We thought we were being careful. We thought we had control. We didn't. The video is still on my phone. I haven't watched it. I don't think I ever will. I haven't opened TikTok since, hey, my name's Wade and I'm from Marshfield, Wisconsin. I've always been into extreme pranks, the kind that get people talking. A few weeks ago, I came across a challenge on TikTok, people getting buried alive in makeshift boxes, streaming the whole thing, and then getting rescued for dramatic effect. It was stupid. Sure, but the views were insane. My friend Josh was obsessed with the idea. He wasn't just doing it for fun. He really thought this could be his big break, the thing that would push his account into viral terror-atory. We started planning 2 hours tops. Then I'd dig him out, and we'd call it a night when we got there. The ground was tougher than we expected, but after an hour of digging, we had a shallow trench, big enough to hold the box. We set up the camera inside. So Josh's audience could see him in real time. He climbed in, holding his phone, grinning like an idiot. I gave him one last look before I started shoveling dirt on top. At first, it was exactly what we wanted. Josh was fine, still rambling about ghosts and joking around the rain, picked up turning the top layer of dirt into thick mud. It wasn't running into the box yet, but it was getting messy. I crouched down, pressing a hand to the ground. The trench was getting slippery, the edges darker, more unstable. Hey, I said, knocking on the box. Box might want to cut it short. This is getting kind of bad. Josh laughed, dude, this is gold. Look at the comments, they're freaking out. 5 more minutes, the rain kept falling. 1 second I was crouched over the box, and the next the ground just collapsed. A thick, heavy sheet of wet earth slid straight into the trench, crashing down on top of the plywood like a goddamn landslide. It hit with a deep, muffled thud. I froze for half a second. My brain refused to register what had just happened. Then I heard it, Josh. Screaming, I dropped to my knees and started digging. My hands sank into the mud, slipping over clumps of dirt. As I tried to clear the box, "Bam, Josh," I yelled, trying to wedge my fingers under the lid. It wouldn't budge. It was buried under too much W. Wait, the air holes? Oh God. The air holes were clogging with mud. Josh was trapped. I scrambled to my feet, slipping in the muck. My breath was coming too fast, my head spinning. I needed help. There was no way I could dig him out alone. I turned and ran. I don't even remember getting to the road. My legs were caked in mud, my clothes soaked my hands, shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone trying to call 911. His phone was still in his hand, the screen dimly lit. His mouth was open, lips caked with mud. His fingernails were shredded, deep scratches running across the inside of the box. Where he tried to claw his way out, his face was pale, his chest still. They pulled him out. Someone started CPR, the rain hammered down. I stood there silent, his phone buzzed weakly in his hand. The stream was still going, and in the comments, hundreds of them, people were still watching. Damn, this is crazy. Is this fake, bro? Wake up, LMAO. Best prank ever. I felt sick that the weight of the mud made it impossible for him to breathe that. By the time we pulled him out, it was too late. I keep thinking about it. If I had ignored him and pulled him out earlier, if I had insisted, if I had made him stop before the rain, if I hadn't run. I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it, the pounding, the muffled screams, the scraping of his nails against the wood. I thought this was just a stupid prank, something for views, something that didn't matter, but it did matter. Josh is dead and people still think it was all part of the show. I'm Lay, and I've always been obsessed with creepy stories and suspense. Growing up in Evington, Montana, there wasn't much to do. So I started a TikTok channel about urban legends. My followers kept spamming me with one request: go to that creepy motel outside town. So many stories about it. I'd heard the rumors, disappearances, crime scenes, strange noises at night, but I didn't believe in any of it still. It sounded like the perfect way to boost my views. So late one evening, I grabbed my phone and a flashlight and headed out. The place had been abandoned for years. The front doors were unlocked, one hanging slightly off its hinges. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the smell of rot. The lobby looked like time had frozen. A broken reception desk, a faded carpet covered in debris, a shattered chandelier on the floor. Graffiti covered the walls, random symbols, names and messages like "get out" and "blood." In room 108, I stepped further inside. The silence was unsettling. Every footstep echoed through the empty halls. The rooms were trashed, mattresses torn open, wallpaper peeling, old furniture covered in dust in one. Found an old suitcase with rotting clothes still inside in another. A child's shoe covered in dirt. I stepped carefully, shining my flashlight into every corner. Then in one room, something made me stop. A dress. It was draped over a chair stiff with age-faded blue fabric, torn in places, and stained with something dark, something that looked too much like dried blood. My breath hitched. I stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath me. My camera picked up every detail. The chat was going crazy. "Bro, leave, that's not normal. Why is that?" Just sitting there, I reached out, hesitated, then touched the fabric. Stiff, brittle, definitely old, but the stain. It didn't feel like just dust and time. Then someone in the comments typed, "Dude, look at the door." I turned my flashlight beam, shaking slightly. The wooden door frame had deep, jagged scratches, like something or someone had clawed at it in desperation. For the first time that night, I felt something shift in my gut. A warning the chat was full of people telling me to get out nothing. The chat was going wild even though I had shut the stream off. My phone buzzed with notifications. People were messaging me freaking out about what they had just heard. I forced myself to swallow. It's just the building, settling. Maybe an animal. Then another sound, a slow, deliberate creak from deeper in the motel, like someone shifting their weight. On an old floorboard, my hands were sweating. But I knew one thing. This was exactly the kind of content people ate up. The more terrifying, the better. If I ran now, it would just look fake. The hinges groaned as I pulled the door open. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness below the air. Smelled damp and stale like mold and something else. Something rotten. I aimed my flashlight down the stairs. Dust floated in the beam. The concrete walls were cracked pipes running along the ceiling. At the bottom, I could make out shelves and broken furniture. One step, then another. The light flickered. My phone vibrated. Someone was calling me, probably a friend watching the stream. I ignored it. I reached the bottom and swept my flashlight across the room. It was cluttered. Old boxes, rusted, tools, a tipped-over chair. The floor was uneven with dark stains on the concrete. Then my flashlight caught something. A mattress, old, disgusting, shoved into the corner, and above it, chains bolted into the wall. I stopped breathing. The chat exploded. WTF, is that dude? Get out, that's a murder. Basement. Then another noise, not from behind me, from inside the basement. A slow, deliberate shuffling sound. I spun around, flashlight shaking in the farthest corner, past the broken shelves. Something moved, a figure. I barely had time to register what I was seeing before it lunged. I ran. I don't even remember turning. I just remember sprinting up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. My phone banged against my leg. My flashlight swung wildly. The thing behind me, whoever it was fast. I heard heavy footsteps pounding on the stairs behind me. I burst into the lobby and bolted for the front door. My foot hit something and I crashed onto the floor. My phone flew from my hand, skidding across the tiles. I scrambled forward, reaching for it, and then hands grabbed my ankle. I kicked, hard, twisting adrenaline making me stronger than I should have been. I barely caught a glimpse of something dirty. Clothes, skin covered in something dark, wild eyes before I wrenched free. I grabbed my phone and ran the motel. Exit was right there, 10 feet away. 5, a heavy impact hit my back. I hit the ground hard. The weight on me was crushing, something rough pressing against my face. I thrashed, trying to turn to see. Then a sharp white H pain exploded through my wrist. I screamed. The pressure vanished. I rolled over, gasping, my arm throbbing wet with something warm. The flashlight lay a few feet away, its beam rolling across the floor. I saw my own blood. My vision blurred. A figure moved in the shifting light. Something metallic glinted in their hand. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I couldn't move my hands. I was cold. My head ached. My mouth was dry. The smell of damp concrete and rust filled my nose. I tried to move, but something held me down. I forced my eyes open. The basement. I was back in the basement. I was sitting on the floor, my back against the wall. My arms were stretched out in front of me, but something felt wrong. I looked down my wrists, or what was left of them. My breath came in, short gasps. My hands were gone. The world swam. I tried to scream, but my throat locked up. I thrashed, but pain shot through my arms, fresh and unbearable. The stumps were wrapped in something filthy, already soaked through with blood. I've been into social media since I was a teenager, but my real obsession was extreme videos, crazy stunts, near-death experiences, anything that made my heart race. Then I met Steve. He wasn't just into watching. He wanted to be the one in front of the camera, pulling off insane tricks for views. The more dangerous, the better. One night we came across a viral clip, some guys jumping off a bridge with a rope swinging out over the river, barely missing the rocks below. The comments were full of people calling them legends, saying how badass it looked. He swore he'd measure everything, double-check the setup, make sure there was no risk. It's going to be huge, he said. 1 million views easy. That was always his mindset. More views, more likes, more reasons to push things further. Felt uneasy, but I didn't want to be the one to kill the excitement. Steve was already making plans, picking the perfect spot. By the time he mentioned buying the rope, I realized I'd stopped protesting the day we filmed. We drove out to an old abandoned bridge over the river, but as I watched him tie the rope to the old metal beams, doubt crept back in. He was rushing, tying knots, quickly checking the tension without really testing it. "Are you sure that's strong enough?" I asked. Steve didn't even glance up. Yeah, it's solid film, okay." I hesitated. The metal looked corroded, the knots looser than I expected, but Steve was already climbing onto the railing, grinning at the camera. His confidence made it seem ridiculous to question him now. "All right," he said. Gripping the rope rolling, I nodded and hit record. Steve gave a F thumbs up, then stepped off the edge. The moment Steve dropped, I knew something was wrong. The rope snapped taut too fast, jerking him midair instead of a smooth arc. His body twisted violently, his shoulder slammed against the rusted bridge beam with a sickening crunch. Then his head struck metal hard, I heard. The impact, a dull, heavy sound, like a hammer on thick steel. Steve's body went limp. His arms, which had been gripping the harness, slackened for a second. He just hung there, swaying slightly, the rope digging into his torso. And then the knot failed. He dropped like a stone, straight down. I screamed. Dropping the phone, my hands clutched the railing as I leaned over. Searching for him, the water below rippled from the impact. Then nothing, no movement, no flailing, no resurfacing. Panic hit me like a freight train. "Steve," I yelled, my voice cracking. People around me reacted. Some gasped. Others cursed. A few ran to the edge to look somewhere. Someone fumbled for their phone, calling 911. I couldn't move. The first guy resurfaced, gasping. "I can't see him," he shouted. "It's too deep." Someone else was yelling on the phone, giving details to emergency services. "He hit his head. He's unconscious. He's under the water." The second swimmer dived again, disappearing beneath the surface. I felt sick. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the railing tighter. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. He was just right here. He was just talking, just smiling. The second guy came up, coughing. "It's too dark. I can't." Sirens in the distance, but getting closer. Then movement in the water. The first guy gasped and pointed there. I see him. Another splash as someone else dove in. This time, they reached him. Two heads broke the surface, struggling to keep Steve afloat. They dragged him toward the shallower part of the riverbank. More people ran down to help. I forced myself to move, legs unsteady. Sprinting down the embankment, stumbling over loose gravel, almost falling. By the time I reached them, paramedics were already rushing in with a stretcher. Steve's face was pale. His lips had a bluish tint. He wasn't moving. One of the paramedics pressed fingers to his neck, then shouted something to his team. They lifted him, moving fast. Water dripped from his clothes, his hair, his slack hands, his head LED slightly exposing a dark wound near his temple. Someone grabbed my arm. I turned, dazed. "A police officer." "You were with him." I nodded. I felt like I was floating outside my own body. "Come with me," he said, leading me toward a patrol car. "We need to ask you some questions." I barely heard him. My eyes stayed locked on the ambulance as they shut the doors, sirens wailing as it sped away. Steve didn't make it. His spine was shattered. The impact had done more damage than I understood in that moment. On the bridge. Even if they had pulled him out faster, even if I had screamed sooner, called 911 sooner, it wouldn't have changed anything. I spent hours at the police station explaining over and over that this wasn't a suicide attempt, that we weren't trying anything. Reckless, that it was supposed to be safe, that he was so sure that he had done the math. They let me go. Eventually, there was no crime, no charges, just a tragedy. The video never got posted. I deleted every clip, every file. But it didn't matter. The moment was burned into my brain. The way he stepped off the ledge, the snap of the rope, the way his body jerked before he went. Still, I haven't touched social media since. Haven't filmed anything. People still do it though. They still chase views, push limits, take risks for the sake of a viral moment. I just hope they understand that some mistakes you don't come back from. I love watching short TikTok videos. A month ago, my friend and I decided to film a prank at a local supermarket. The idea was simple. A few of us would act as regular shoppers, while one person would suddenly scream about a missing child, causing everyone to panic and search. The goal was to go viral. These kinds of videos were trending, and we wanted views and likes at first. Everything went smoothly. We set up our phones at different angles to capture the reactions. I played the role of the frantic parent running through the aisles, calling out for my lost son. People turned their heads, some immediately joining in to help. It was working better than we expected. Some employees were already mobilizing, looking around, speaking into their radios. The confusion was real, and the footage was going to be perfect. Then things took a turn. Brian, one of my friends, was supposed to act as another concerned shopper blending into the scene. But instead, he got way too into it. He started yelling at people to move faster, pushing past employees, demanding they shut down the store exits. At first, I thought he was just committing to the bit, trying to make the scene more intense. But then he shoved a store clerk so hard, she nearly fell into a display of cereal boxes. I shot him a look, trying to silently tell him to tone it down. But he was in the zone, feeding off the chaos. People were getting nervous. An older man backed away, gripping his shopping cart like a shield. A woman clutched her purse and pulled her daughter close. Employees were exchanging uneasy glances. Then Brian grabbed a metal shopping basket and slammed it onto the floor. The loud clang echoing through the store. Everyone needs to help, he shouted. A kid is missing, damn it. I could see a security guard approaching from the front of the store, moving quickly. But cautiously, another employee was pulling out a phone, probably to call the manager or the police. The prank was spiraling out of control. I stepped toward Brian, lowering my voice. Dude, stop. We got the footage. Let's go. But he didn't even look at me. He was breathing hard, eyes darting around wildly, like he was playing to an invisible audience before I could do anything else. He grabbed a glass jar of instant coffee from the shelf and hurled it. The jar smashed against the security guard's chest and exploded into shards. The man staggered back, stunned. Coffee granules spilled onto the white tile floor. Gasps filled the air. A woman near the dairy section screamed. Someone had their phone out filming everything. Brian threw his arms up, grinning like this was the best scene of his life. This is for top-tier content, baby, he yelled. My stomach dropped. People were staring. A couple of teenagers near the self-checkout looked between us and the security guard, whispering. An employee near the deli counter had already disappeared, probably running to the back office to call for help. This wasn't a prank anymore. Grabbed Brian's arm. We have to leave. Now he yanked away from me, still smiling like this was all part of the plan. But there was no plan, just an escalating mess. The security guard, recovering from the hit, reached for his radio. His face was red with anger. Enough, you're done? He said, taking a step forward. I turned toward the exit. We needed to leave before the cops got here, before this got worse. Then I heard Brian laughing behind me. The security guard lunged at Brian, trying to grab his arm, but Brian twisted away and bolted down the nearest aisle. My heart was pounding. This was bad, way worse than anything we had imagined. I stood frozen for a second, watching as Brian sprinted past shelves of canned food, knocking over a display of pasta boxes. As he ran, the guard barked something into his radio, calling for backup. Other employees were moving in, blocking off exits. Shoppers were scrambling out of the way, some still filming. Brian wasn't stopping. He reached the kitchenware section, grabbed something from a shelf, and turned around to face the approaching guard. My stomach clenched when I saw what he was holding, a long stainless steel kitchen knife. I felt sick. People gasped. Some started backing away, murmuring in shock. The security guard froze for a split second, his hand hovering near his belt, but he wasn't armed. He took a step back, raising his hands. Put that down, he said firmly. Brian just laughed, spinning the knife in his hand like he was still putting on a show. Nobody's catching me, he said, his voice full of adrenaline. I'm not getting arrested over some dumb prank. I couldn't move. This was my fault. I had convinced everyone to do this. And now Brian was standing in the middle of a grocery store, waving a knife like a maniac, while people recorded every second. One of the store managers appeared near the front entrance, holding a phone to his ear. Police. They had to be on their way. Brian, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Come on, man, just drop it. He turned his head slightly, like he was actually listening, but then a voice shouted from the store's entrance. Drop the weapon hands where we can see them. Cops. 2 officers rushed in, guns drawn. The moment Brian saw them, His expression changed, his grin disappeared. He hesitated, his hand tightening around the knife handle. Brian, I tried again. He took a step back, another. Then, without warning, he spun and sprinted toward the emergency exit at the back of the store. Everything was chaos. People were screaming. The officers rushed after him. I ran, two shoving past stunned customers, my pulse hammering in my ears by the time I made it. Outside, Brian was already at the far end of the parking lot, darting between parked cars. The cops were closing in. Fast, he glanced over his shoulder, saw how close they were, and made a split-second decision that changed everything. He turned and ran straight at them, knife still in his hand. It happened so fast. A loud, sharp crack split the air. Brian jerked back his feet, stumbling another shot. He collapsed onto the asphalt, the knife slipping from his fingers, blood spread across his shirt. I stopped in my tracks, my breath caught in my throat. People in the parking lot were screaming. Someone yelled, "Oh my God!" Brian wasn't moving. The officers approached cautiously, guns still raised. I felt my legs buckle, but I couldn't look away. The cameras were still rolling. Dozens of phones were pointed at his body. The viral video we had wanted so badly was happening, but not the way we had planned. I didn't care about TikTok anymore. I didn't care about likes or views. I just stood there staring at my friend lying motion on the ground. Realized that nothing was ever going to be the same. Again, I liked making short documentary clips about crimes in my neighborhood for TikTok, where I narrated criminal stories. It was something I did for fun, a way to bring awareness to things happening around me. One night, I was walking home late, cutting through an empty lot like I always did. It was dark, but the street lights from the nearby road threw enough light to see outlines of things. I was halfway across when I heard a scuffle, a dull thooing, heavy breathing, then a low groan of pain. I stopped. My first thought was that it was just some drunk guys messing around, but then I saw them. Two men were beating the hell out of a third. The victim was already on the ground, curled up, barely moving. One of them kicked him hard in the ribs. The other crouched down and grabbed him by the collar, saying something. I couldn't hear the guy on the ground, let out a weak, choked cough. My pulse jumped. I ducked behind a half-broken wooden fence, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. Instinct took over. I hit record. My breath was shallow as I zoomed, and making sure I got a clear shot. Their faces were visible, no mask, no hoods. One of them glanced around, but they were too focused on their target to notice me. I knew I should call 911, but my mind was racing. If I ran, they might hear me. If I made a noise, I was screwed. I told myself I'd send the video to the cops as soon as I got home. But the truth, a small part of me thought this could be huge. A real crime caught on camera, something that could actually help catch dangerous people. The man on the ground tried to move, but the standing guy slammed his knee into his stomach. He stopped struggling. The other man leaned down and said something close to his ear. Then, without another word, they walked off fast, but not panicked, like they knew no one would interfere, like this was routine. I stayed behind that fence, heart hammering, until I was sure they were gone. Then I be bold. I didn't call 911 right away. Instead, I ran straight home, locked my door, and uploaded the video. My hands were still shaking as I edited the footage to enhance the faces. The streetlights had been bright enough to catch their features. Clearly short hair, tattoos, cold expressions. I added a caption. This happened in our neighborhood. Do you know these guys? Then I posted it. It spread fast in the comments. People started recognizing them. A few even dropped names. That's Daniel and Nico. They're part of that gang near the gas station. They do this all the time. No one ever does anything. I watched the view count climb. My chest felt tight, but in a good way, like I was doing something important, exposing criminals, maybe even helping that guy get justice. Then the messages started. At first, it was just random trolls, stay out of other people's business, not your problem. But then I got one that made my stomach drop, delete the video. Now, no profile picture, no name, just that. I stared at it for a long time before another one popped up. You don't know what you've done. I swallowed hard, my fingers hovering over the screen. More messages flooded. Put it in, take it down, or you'll regret it. Last warning, delete it. Or else my hands went cold. I wasn't feeling like a hero anymore. I panicked. My first instinct was to delete the video, but I hesitated. If I did that, it would look like I was scared, and wasn't that the whole point, to expose people like them? But then my phone buzzed. Again, we know where you live, that did it. My stomach twisted, and I felt a wave of nausea. I grabbed my keys and ran out of my apartment. I needed help at the police station. I showed them the messages, the video, everything. The officer on duty watched it twice, his face unreadable. Then he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "This is good footage," he admitted, "but you should have come to us first instead of posting it." "I thought it would help," I said, my voice unsteady. He nodded, then handed my phone back. "We'll look into it, but these things take time." I left feeling worse than when I came in. Time was something I didn't have. The threats kept coming, calls from unknown numbers, anonymous comments. At first, I told myself they were just trying to scare me. Then one night, as I was walking home from work, I noticed a black car parked near my building. I didn't recognize it, but when I glanced over, I saw a silhouette in the driver's seat watching me. I walked faster. The car didn't move inside my apartment. I locked every door and window. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I messaged my friend, told her what was happening. She told me I needed to stay somewhere else for a while. I was about to agree when I heard something outside my door, a soft, deliberate knock. I froze. Then a voice, low, casual, almost amused. "You shouldn't have posted that video." I backed away slowly. My mind raced. My phone was still in my hand. I dialed 911, but before I could press call, the doorknob twisted. I ran for the bathroom and locked myself inside. I barely had time to breathe before I heard the sound of my front door being kicked in. I don't remember how long I sat there pressed against the bathtub, listening to them move through my apartment. "Where is she?" I covered my mouth, trying not to make a sound. Footsteps closer. A hand rattled the bathroom doorknob. Then a low chuckle. "You really shouldn't have done that." I braced myself for the worst, but before they could break, in a disc sound cut through the air. Sirens, they swore. A few seconds later, I heard them run the front. Door slammed, then silence. I stayed hidden until I heard pounding on the door again. Police. When I finally stepped out, my apartment was trashed, drawers ripped open, furniture overturned. A message had been carved into the wall with a knife. "Keep your mouth shut." I gave my statement. The cops said they'd increase patrols near my building, but they knew how these things worked. Retaliation wasn't over. They were right. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital with both arms broken. The details are a blur, flashes of pain, hands grabbing me, being thrown to the ground. They made sure I wouldn't hold a camera. Again, they didn't kill me, but they made their point. The police finally arrested the two men from the video, but it didn't matter. Their crew was still out there watching. I don't post crime stories anymore. My TikTok is abandoned. I barely even go outside sometimes. I wonder what happened to the man in the video. The one they beat, if he got out, if he's still alive, I'll never know, and I'm too scared to find out. My younger sister, Lizzie, was always a happy, energetic girl. But about a year ago, she got hooked on TikTok. At first, it was harmless dancing videos, cooking clips, little snippets of her daily life. It was cute, honestly. But over time, she got obsessed. She started comparing herself to big influencers, constantly talking about how she needed to look perfect on camera. I noticed the changes gradually. She spent hours editing her videos, re-recording them until they were just right. She started wearing makeup every day, even at home. Then it got worse. She began skipping meals. At first, it was subtle. She'd say she wasn't hungry at dinner, or she'd take tiny portions and push food around on her plate. When I asked, she laughed it off. "It's just for a video, Em." She said, "I want to do a what I eat in a day vlog, and I need it to look aesthetic." Her boyfriend Brian wasn't helping. He was as obsessed with her TikTok as she was, if not more. He filmed her constantly eating, waking up, putting on makeup, even just sitting on the couch scrolling through. Her phone content is everything, he told her. "You got to post daily to stay relevant." She ate up every word he said. Mom and Dad barely noticed. They were busy with work, trusting Lizzie to take care of herself. I tried to tell them she was acting weird, but they just said she's growing up. Social media is normal for kids her age, but it didn't feel normal. A few months later, the change in her appearance was undeniable. She was a skeleton. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply, her arms were like twigs, and her clothes hung off her. But on camera, she smiled, like everything was fine, Lizzie. You need to eat. I told her one night, standing in her doorway, she was sitting on her bed staring at her phone. She barely glanced at me. You don't get it, Emily, she said. Voice flat. This is what people want to see. No, one wants to watch a fat girl dance. I was stunned. Lizzie was never fat. She was just a normal, healthy teenage girl who told you that she rolled her eyes. It's just the way it is. Look at the top creators. They're all thin. They're all perfect. I wanted to argue to tell her she was beautiful and that none of this mattered. But I knew she wouldn't listen. She was too deep into it. Brian made things worse. She's fine. He told me when I confronted him about it. She's just dead, dedicated. You're jealous because she's got followers. And you don't, I wanted to punch him, but Lizzie was right there looking at him like he was some kind of genius. Then one night I heard a strange noise from the bathroom, a dull thud, followed by a low gurgling sound. I froze. Brian was standing outside the door holding his phone up like he was recording my stomach. Twisted, Brian, what the hell are you doing? He didn't answer, he just kept filming. I shoved him aside and tried the door locked. Lizzie, I banged on. No response. Just that awful wet choking noise. Something was wrong. I didn't think. I just threw my shoulder against the door once, twice, then it burst open. Lizzie was on the floor. Her body was crumpled. Her limbs twisted, unnaturally foam, bubbled from her lips, her chest barely, rising her eyes fluttered. Unfocused. Brian stood there, still holding his phone, the screen glowing in the dim light. She hasn't eaten in days, he muttered. This is crazy, but he wasn't scared. He wasn't even trying to help her. He was filming. Filming her? Dying, I lunged at Brian, grabbing his phone and shoving him back. Call 911, I yelled. But he just stood there, eyes fixed on the screen, like he was watching a movie. Not real life. My hands were shaking as I dialed my sister. She's unconscious. She's not breathing. Right, please? Hurry. I dropped to my knees beside Lizzie, pressing my fingers to her neck. Her pulse was weak, barely there. Lizzie, wake up. Come on, wake up. I begged, shaking her shoulder. Her skin was cold. Clammy. Brian was still filming. Are you out of your mind? I screamed at him, help me. He didn't move. This could go viral. He murmured, people. Eat this stuff up, the collapse, the drama. It's raw, it's real. I saw red. I grabbed his phone and threw it across the room, hearing it crack against the wall. He finally reacted, snapping his head toward me like I'd done something unforgivable. What the hell, Emily, get out. I hissed. Are you serious? I said, get out. Something in my face must have convinced him because he scoffed, shaking his head, and walked out like this was all some inconvenience to him. Seconds later, I heard sirens. Paramedics burst in, pushing me aside. As they worked on Lizzie, they lifted her onto a stretcher, one of them barking questions at me. How long had she been out? What was she taking? Did she have a history of eating disorders? I answered the best I could, but my head was spinning. Then I heard one of them say, we're losing her. The words hit me like a punch. I followed them to the ambulance, my legs barely working. Brian wasn't anywhere in sight, probably too busy trying to salvage his phone at the hospital. I sat in the waiting room for what felt like hours. Mom and Dad arrived in a panic, demanding answers. I told them everything about Lizzie, skipping meals about Brian, encouraging it about how I found her on the floor while he just watched. Mom was crying. Dad was furious, but none of it mattered if Lizzie didn't wake up. A doctor finally came out. She's stable, he said, but his face was grim. Her heart stopped in the ambulance. We got it beating again. But there's been some damage. Lizzie was alive, but not whole. When we were finally allowed in, I barely recognized. Her tubes ran from her arms. Monitors beeped steadily. Her face was so gaunt, her body so fragile, like a stiff breeze could break her. I took her hand, Lizzie, her eyes opened for a second. I felt hope, but then she just stared. Not at me. Not at anything. The doctor's voice echoed in my head. Brain damage, prolonged starvation, oxygen deprivation. She wasn't the same. She would never be the same. A week later, I checked her TikTok. Brian had uploaded the video. The comments were flooded with people saying how inspiring she was, how dedicated she had been to her goals. Some even called it the ultimate commitment to beauty. Others speculated whether she did it on purpose, turning her suffering into some twisted trend. I wanted to vomit. Brian was still posting too, moved on. Like nothing happened. He even made a tribute video about Lizzie using her collapse as some fake emotional clickbait, and people ate it up. I tried to report it. Nothing happened. TikTok didn't take it down, the views kept climbing, and Brian, he was fine, no charges, no consequences. He hadn't forced her to do anything, so legally he wasn't responsible. Meanwhile, Lizzie sat in a wheelchair, staring at nothing. She barely spoke, she barely moved. The doctor said there was a chance for improvement, but no. Guarantees I take care of her. Now feed her, brush her hair, try to talk to her even when she doesn't answer. Sometimes I catch her staring at a blank phone screen, like she's still waiting for the camera to turn on, like she still thinks she's supposed to perform. Brian moved on to another girl, another TikTok star on the rise. I see his posts sometimes, and it makes me sick. I used to think social media was harmless, that TikTok was just fun. But it took my sister away from me, and the worst part, she's still here, but the real Lizzie is gone. I'm Sam from Clifton, New Jersey. I run a TikTok account where I show off weird and interesting things I find at flea markets and junkyards. People love seeing the strange random stuff. I dig up old gadgets, creepy dolls, bizarre antiques. It's fun, and sometimes I even make a little money reselling things. One evening, I was walking home after checking out a flea market. On the other side of town, the sun was already setting, and the streets were mostly empty. I took my usual shortcut past an old abandoned warehouse. One of those places that had been shut down for years, covered in graffiti with shattered windows and rusted outdoors. That's when I saw a black duffel bag just sitting there against the wall, half hidden behind a dumpster. At first I thought someone had just dumped some trash, but something was about it. Felt off. It wasn't torn up or dirty like you'd expect. It looked untouched, brand new. I glanced around. No one in sight. The street was silent, except for the distant hum of traffic. I nudged the bag with my foot. It was heavy. I crouched down, hesitated for a second, then unzipped it, just a little. My heart almost stopped. Stacks of cash, neatly bundled, tightly packed. This wasn't a few loose bills. This was serious money, tens of thousands, maybe more. I pulled out my phone and started recording, guys. This has to be a joke, right? I whispered into the camera, flipping it to show the open bag. My hands were shaking. What would you do if you found this? I looked around again. Still. No one, no voices, no footsteps, just me and the bag full of cash. I wanted to believe it. It was some kind of social experiment. Maybe a prank for YouTube. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Nobody leaves this kind of money lying around unless there's a reason. I zipped the bag up and stood there for a few seconds debating. My gut told me to walk away, just pretend I never saw it. But my brain was screaming, this is life-changing money. I could pay off my debt, buy better equipment, maybe even move out of my crappy apartment before I could think about it too much. I grabbed the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked away as fast as I could. Without running, when I got home, I locked the door, shut the blinds, and dumped the cash onto my bed. It didn't even seem real. I started recording again, giving my followers a closer look. The video blew up overnight. People were freaking out in the comments. Some were telling me to go to the police. Others said I was an idiot for posting it online. A few even claimed the money was probably drug-related, and that I should get rid of it immediately by morning. The video had over 500,000 views. My DMs were flooded. I needed to know if the money was real. I decided to take a few bills to the bank just to check. I figured if they were fake, then this was all some elaborate scam and I could forget about it. But if they were real at the bank, I waited in line, my hands sweating. When I got to the teller, I kept it casual. Hey, I just want to make sure these bills are legit. I said, sliding a few across the counter. The teller, a middle-aged guy with glasses, barely looked up as he ran the bills. Through a machine, it beeped. He picked them up, flipped through them, then frowned. These are real, he said slowly. Looking at me for the first time, his expression changed. Like something wasn't right. Where'd you get these? He asked. His tone was different now, sharper. I forced a laugh. Just some old cash. found cleaning out my grandpa's place. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he nodded, slid the money back, and gave me a tight smile. Be careful where you spend it. He said I didn't ask what he meant. I just grabbed the bills and walked out heart pounding that night. As I was about to crash, I noticed something weird. A small piece of paper had been slipped under my apartment door. I picked it up, flipped it over. The message was short, written in thick black marker. Return what isn't yours while you still can. I stared at it, feeling a cold wave of dread settle over me. At first, I thought it was some internet troll who figured out where I lived. Maybe someone messing with me after seeing my TikTok, but then I checked my front door's lock. It looked fine. No, scratches, no signs of tampering. That meant whoever left. This note didn't try to break in. They wanted me to know they could get close. I swallowed hard. I told myself it was nothing, a prank, some kid messing around. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a really, really bad mistake. The next morning, my paranoia got worse. I stepped outside to grab coffee and saw my car. 2 of the tires were slashed deep, ugly. Cuts, not some slow leak. Whoever did this wanted to send a message, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just a joke anymore. I looked around the parking lot. It was mostly empty. No security cameras, no one watching. I knew then that this was about the bag. Someone had been watching me. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, hoping for a normal notification, anything to make me feel like things were still normal, but it was a DM, no username, no profile picture, just a single message. Last warning, we're coming. I stood there staring at the screen, heart pounding. I had to get rid of the money now. That night I made a decision. I wasn't keeping the cash. It wasn't worth it. I stuffed the money back into the duffel bag, zipped it up, and decided to drive as far as I could and dump it. Just leave it somewhere, walk away, forget this ever happened, except I never got the chance around 2 a.m. Just as I was getting ready to leave, I heard something outside my apartment, footsteps. Then a noise near my front door, a soft metallic clink. I barely had time to react before the lock turned. The door burst open. 3 men in masks rushed in, no words, no hesitation. The first guy grabbed me, slammed me against the wall so hard I felt my ribs crack. I tried to fight back, but the second one punched me in the gut, knocking the wind out of me. The third guy walked past us straight to the duffel bag. He didn't even check. Inside, he just flung it over his shoulder and turned back toward the door. I was gasping for air, trying to push the guy off me when the first one leaned in close and whispered, "You should have never touched it." Then they were gone. I lay on, the floor pain spreading through my ribs, listening to the sound of their footsteps disappearing down the hall. I wanted to call the cops, but what was I going to say? That I stole a bag of money, posted it online, and got robbed. Robbed by the real owners. I deleted my TikTok that night. Every video, every post gone for the next few days. I stayed inside, barely sleeping, jumping at every noise, but no one came back. No more messages, no more warnings. I don't know who they were. I don't want to know. Just know one thing. Some things aren't worth finding. My name is Vanessa. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm into street art. I had a TikTok blog about graffiti, and I wanted to film some pieces in an abandoned area. There were some really cool works there. I grabbed my phone and went in the afternoon thinking it was safe. At first, everything was great. I recorded murals, got some awesome shots. I kept thinking this is my chance to blow up. The place was quiet, just the occasional sound of traffic in the distance. The walls were covered in layers of old and new tags, a mix of faded peeling paint and fresh, vibrant colors. Some of the work was insanely detailed. Full-scale portraits, intricate lettering, even political statements sprayed across entire brick walls. The kind of stuff that gets thousands of views. I moved further in stepping over broken glass and debris, adjusting angles for the best lighting. The smell of spray paint lingered in the air. Fresh, someone had been here recently. I figured I might even catch an artist in action get some behind-the-scenes footage that would be gold. I turned a corner into a narrow alley. That's when I saw them 3 guys mid-piece cans and hand-filling in a massive design. There were good, sharp lines, perfect shading. I didn't recognize their tags, but I knew quality when I saw it without thinking. I lifted my phone, hitting record. One of them turned his head, snapped toward me. Then the others followed. "Who the hell are you?" one of them shouted. I hesitated. I have a TikTok about graffiti. I'm just filming." They moved toward me fast. I took a step back, holding up my hands. "Hey, I'm just here for the art." That's all. One of them, the tallest, had something in his hand. A knife delete that he said. His voice was low, controlled, but I could feel the weight behind it. My heart pounded. I didn't delete it, he repeated, stepping closer. I fumbled with my phone, hands shaking. Okay. I swiped at the screen, trying to bring up the video. My fingers weren't working right then. Sudden pain, sharp. One of them had swung at me, hitting my arm. A burning sting shot through me. I looked down. Blood, it dripped from my wrist, bright against my skin. I stumbled back, clutching my arm. Blood seeped between my fingers, warm and slick. My phone slipped from my other hand, clattering onto the cracked pavement. "She's recording us," one of them muttered. "I told you to delete it." The one with the knife said, his tone sharp, controlled. I tried to speak, to say something, anything that would make them stop. But before I could, a heavy boot slammed into my stomach. The force knocked the air from my lungs. I collapsed onto my side, gasping, the taste of iron rising in my throat. They kept coming, a kick to my ribs. Another, my back, my vision blurred. I tried to curl up to shield my face, my stomach, anything vital, but they didn't. Stop. My head spun, the pain becoming something distant, dull. I felt the knife again, sharp, deep, slicing into my arm. Then nothing. They stepped back. "She's done," one of them muttered. "Get the phone." Another said. I heard the crunch of gravel as one of them picked it up. A long pause, then a scoff. "She's live," streaming, a beat of silence. Then the sound of footsteps, fast retreating. I lay there, staring up at the narrow sliver of sky between the buildings. My ears rang. My chest heaved, trying to pull in breath. Taste of blood was thick in my mouth somehow. I forced myself onto my side. My arm, my dominant arm, felt wrong, heavy, wet. I had to move. I pressed my good hand against the pavement, tried to push myself up, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The alley stretched before me, endless. My vision tunned. Everything felt too far, too slow. A shape appeared at the alley's mouth. A person, then another, more voices, concerned, alarmed. Someone knelt beside me, their hands hovering, hesitant. "She's hurt, call 911 more, movement more." Voices I felt, hands on my shoulders, lifting me. Slightly the world swayed, then nothing. I woke up in a hospital bed. My mouth was dry, my body heavy, like I was sinking into the mattress. The room smelled like antiseptic and something metallic. I turned my head. My right arm was gone, bandaged up to the elbow, but gone. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to catch up, for the weight of what had happened to settle. But all I felt was hollow. A nurse came in, spoke to me, asked questions. I answered, but my voice didn't sound like mine. An infection. They said too much damage, they had to amputate. The police came next. They asked about the men, about what I remembered. I told them everything. They said they'd look into it. I could tell by the way they said it that they didn't expect to find much. My phone was gone, the video too. No evidence, no faces, nothing. Those guys were still out there tagging walls, moving on to the next spot. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a hospital bed, missing half my arm, drowning in medical bills. TikTok didn't make me famous. It made me a victim I should have never filmed. And then I found a TikTok tutorial on how to dye an old t-shirt using a mix of paint and bleach. It looks simple, just mix the two, apply the solution, and let it set the colors in the video. Turned out so cool, all these pastel swirls and faded patterns. I figured I'd try it myself. I showed the video to my mom. She wasn't exactly thrilled, but agreed to help and film the process. "Just don't ruin the floor," she said, handing me a plastic sheet. I set everything up in the kitchen: an old t-shirt, a plastic bowl, some fabric paint, and a half-full bottle of bleach. The girl in the video used specific measurements, but I just eyeballed it: a bit of paint, a splash of bleach, then stirred it with a plastic spoon. The liquid turned a weird grayish purple color, thicker than I expected. The smell hit me right away. Sharp chemical, almost like a pool, but stronger. I wrinkled my nose, but brushed it off. The TikTok girl had said the bleach would activate the dye, so maybe the smell was just part of the process. Mom stood back with her phone, recording. "All right, show us what you got," she said. Sounding more Ed than anything, I dipped the brush into the mixture and started painting it onto the fabric. The color looked dull at first, but as it soaked in, it started lightening in. Patches, the t-shirt looked tie-dyed in a weird, uneven way. I kept going, brushing more of the mix across the fabric, working faster. Now the smell got stronger, but I figured that was just from the bleach reacting with the paint. Looking cool. Mom said from behind the camera. I smiled and kept working, but after a few minutes, my eyes started to water. I blinked, trying to clear them, but my throat suddenly felt tight. I coughed once, then again harder. This time Mom laughed. "Come on, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's just a little bleach." I wasn't trying to be dramatic. My throat burned and my eyes stung like I'd been chopping onions for hours. I wiped at them with the back of my hand and kept painting, trying to finish. Quickly, the burning got worse. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and my chest felt tight. I tried to ignore it, but then I noticed something else. The t-shirt was smoking at first. I thought I was imagining it, but then I saw thin wisps of white vapor curling up from the fabric. The smell had changed too, no longer just strong bleach, but something harsher like melted plastic. I dropped the brush. Mom, she zoomed in with the camera. "Whoa, that looks awesome. It's like a special effect." I wasn't so sure. The smoke thickened, curling up toward my face. My eyes burned worse than before. I took a step back, but it was too late. The vapor hit me full in the face. A fearing pain shot through my eyes and nose. My lungs spazzed, forcing a choking cough out of me. I staggered, gasping for air, but every breath made it worse. My vision blurred, my knees buckled, and I collapsed. To the floor through the haze, I heard Mom's voice, still holding the phone. "Are you serious? You're not faking this, right?" My whole body was shaking. My vision had gone blurry, like I was underwater, and my lungs felt like they were filling with fire. I tried to scream, but my throat seized up. I could barely breathe. "Mom," I gasped, reaching for her call. "Call someone." She finally lowered the phone. Okay, just calm down," she said. But there was hesitation in her voice, like she still wasn't sure if I was overreacting. I wasn't. Could feel something was seriously wrong. My face was burning, my chest felt like it was caving in, and my skin tingled like it was dissolving. I clawed at my eyes, but that only made it worse. I had no idea what I had just inhaled, but my body was shutting down. "Mom," I screamed, or I tried to. It came out weak. Broken call, 911 something. And my voice must have finally snapped her out of it. I heard her curse under her breath and then the clatter of her phone as she scrambled to dial. I curled up on the floor, my head pounding. The smoke still hung in the air, and every breath I took made my lungs seize up. My hands and arms trembled uncontrollably. I couldn't stop coughing. Then I heard her say something that made my stomach drop. "Yeah, hi. My daughter had some kind of reaction to bleach. I don't know. She was doing a tick